Okay, welcome everyone. This is a wonderful, wonderful occasion, and I'm very pleased and privileged to be able to be your master of ceremonies for this event. I was one of Juris's first students, and he had an immense impact in my life, in my career. I think you'll hear a lot of stories today. We have a nice slate of speakers from all walks who will tell you some anecdotes and some wonderful stories about the impact that Juris had on their lives. It's nice to have so many faces here, a lot of people I haven't seen for a long time. We have Juris's 3 children here, Renita somewhere, and Audrey right there, and Martin there in the back. So I'm glad you could make it. All right, I'd like to start by introducing the Dean of the Ann S. Bowers College of Computing and Information Science, Kavita Bala, who will give a few welcoming remarks. She's right there. Okay.
Does the mic work? Is this good enough?
It does.
Great, good. Well, good morning, and thank you all for coming here and joining us to celebrate the life and the career of Juris Hartmanis. You've come here today, and some of you have traveled far to be here, and we appreciate that because of the tremendous impact that Juris has had, not only, of course, at Cornell, but obviously broadly on the entire field of computer science. Juris was one of the original pioneers, creating the field of computational complexity, which is the fundamental underpinning of modern computer science. And his seminal work established really computer science as an independent field of study. He also chaired our department, one of the first computer science departments, and under his leadership, graduates went on, many of the graduates are here, went on to become distinguished faculty members and leaders at new computer science departments, which at that time didn't really exist and that were forming all over the country. The other thing that Juris did, which was very unique to him, is he cultivated a collegial and a collaborative culture here that was essential, I think, to the department's success and is now ingrained into the core values of the computer science department here and actually the broader college. The college is computer science, information science, and statistics and data science, but the culture that Juris created really permeates the entire values that the Bowers College has. He was a deep intellectual, and as you know, a deep intellectual thinker and a visionary administrative leader. And that is really a rare combination. The ability to really have that depth and that breadth is what made Juris so unique. Personally, I just, just talk about my experience with him. I actually joined right about the time when he had retired. But being in a department which had Juris as a presence and a colleague was an astounding privilege and an honor. So I talked a little bit about the culture that Juris created. I remember a time when we were discussing a faculty hire and there were lots of dissenting opinions. And Juris actually reached out to me to understand my dissenting and minority point of view on that issue. And even as a new assistant, it was a brand new assistant professor, Juris would listen to you if you had an informed opinion. And of course, it was important that you were informed, and otherwise he would educate you, which is a wonderful experience too. But for a junior assistant professor, that ability to impact his thinking, and you can see that you're having an impact on the thinking of this person, was humbling and empowering for us. And I think that's actually the culture that we have. He set the standard of treating the opinions of all faculty, including brand new junior faculty, with respect, so that we all felt we were fundamentally part of a department whose future we were completely invested in. We could play a role in it, and therefore we cared enough that we made sure we were playing an important role and helping everybody pull together. And I would argue that attitude lives on today and is what makes Cornell Computer Science special. As Dexter said, I'm looking forward to hearing all the great stories. Many of you worked with him very closely over the years, and I'm looking forward to hearing that. And you all know, of course, Juris's research earned him many awards and accolades over his time. He has had such a big impact, including, of course, a prestigious Turing Award. Today, I just wanted to share one piece of information. Some of those of you who are local here have heard about nothing else from me for a while, which is that we're going to get a new CIS building in 2025. But those of you who are visiting, I want to share with you, we'll have a meeting, and I'm excited to, a building, and I'm excited to announce that there'll be a conference room in the building that'll be named after Juris. So the naming is made possible. Yeah, absolutely. I want to share with you the naming is made possible by the generosity of Bill Pugh, who many of you know was a computer science class of 1988, and his wife, Lisa. And they wanted to honor the kind of professor and person that Juris was, who beyond his intellectual contributions also clearly recognized and invested very heavily in building community within our department. And he knew that that was critical for a successful department. So the new space will bear his name and allow members of our community to gather and collaborate, we hope, for decades to come. So with that, I want to introduce, but she's not here, unfortunately, in person, Martha Pollack, the president of Cornell University. She really did want to be here, but she could not, unfortunately, be here physically. So she shared a little video that she'd like to share about yours. So thank you and welcome again to Ithaca.
Juris Hartmanis was an incredible scholar, a visionary researcher, academic leader, teacher, and mentor who had a tremendous impact at Cornell and beyond. Indeed, when I decided to come to Cornell, I was in awe of the set of Cornell faculty members whose influence on their fields was nothing short of profound, and none more so than Professor Hartmanis. He was appropriately known as the father of computational complexity, the branch of computer science that provides its theoretical underpinnings and that gives it its rigorous scientific foundation. I vividly remember being introduced to the notions of computational complexity as a graduate student and recognizing with delight both how important and how beautiful those foundational concepts were, concepts that had their origins in the early work of Professor Hartmanis. It's no surprise that he received so many awards in his lifetime, including the Turing Award, the Nobel Prize of Computer Science. We at Cornell are so fortunate to have had him on our faculty for more than half a century, and we are grateful for the enormous intellectual legacy that he leaves us.
Many of you may not know, but Martha Pollack is actually a tenured member of our department. She's a computer scientist specializing in artificial intelligence. And I should let you know that was probably the fastest tenure decision that the department has ever made. Okay, I have a little bit of time left. First of all, I want to thank Kavita for her remarks. That was very nice. So thanks a lot for that. I get a chance now to say a few words of my own. I was one of Juris's early students, and when I came, the department was very small. Now we're the Ann S. Bowers College of Computing and Information Science with 3 departments, but back when we started, we had there were something like 13 faculty members in the department. Now there are 62 in the department, and that's not counting field members. I was a young undergrad at Dartmouth, and I heard about some of this work that Juris and John Hopcroft and people like that were doing. I took a course my senior year, learned about all this stuff, undecidability of the halting problem, computational complexity. This was in 1974, so NP completeness was very new, the work of Steve Cook, Dick Karp. I was enraptured by this, and I knew immediately that I wanted to do this for a career, and I wanted to come to Cornell to do it. So Cornell was my first choice, and I applied and luckily got in. I came here and discovered that the computer science department here was a computer science department with, guess how many computers? 0. The entire computational infrastructure was an IBM 370 that belonged to the university, but no computers in the department. It was known as a theory shop. And if you came here, we had other things going on, but really the focus was on theory. And it's a little bit of a prejudice that stuck with us for a long time. And it took us a long time to kind of shake that perception outside. I think we've managed to do that in the meantime, but it stuck with us for a long time. But one of the nice things about having a small department, it was very cohesive at the time. Everybody, all the faculty had lunch together. That was clear. Juris took me under his wing and gave me a lot of advice, and other people in the department gave me a lot of advice. Doors were always open. That's not the case everywhere that I've spent time. Doors are closed many other places. They were open here, and that's one thing that I didn't appreciate at the time, but now I do, and it stuck with us. I think we still have that today, and this is something that that Juris started. His door was always open for me. I could come in. I didn't work very closely with him. He was working with another student at the time. I was pretty independent, but I could go in anytime I wanted and knock on his door, and he never turned me away. And he always gave me very good advice. I took a course, my first semester from Juris, Automata and Computability. One of the things that was noticeable in his lectures that I'm not sure he even realized, but he would say clearly many times, and he said it with a certain gravitas, and I don't know if I can duplicate the accent, but was a little roll of the R, clearly, like that. And it usually came at the least clear part of the lecture. But we started keeping track of the number of times he said it, and I think the world record was 37 in one lecture. But one of the things that that showed me, anyway, was that he knew exactly what to say and what not to say, how much to say. When you're dealing with theoretical subjects, it's important to get exactly the right balance of formalism and intuition. And he hit that nail right on the head every time. And I have learned so much from taking that course, and I TA'd the course with him the following semester. And just watching the way he does this, what he says and what he doesn't say. And when he says clearly, that's an indication that you should go out and dig a little bit deeper to find out the true underpinnings of what's going on. So that's something that I learned from him, and since that time I have modeled my own style of teaching on that pattern, and I think it's been very successful. But that comes directly from Juris. I think, let's see. I mentioned that the department was very small back then, small and cohesive department. Even though we're now a large department and a college, we are still a small department in spirit. And when I say that, I mean that we act like a small department. We try to make decisions by consensus. So we have not fragmented as many other places have. When we have our department meetings, our weekly department meetings, we all sit around a giant table in a conference room. Some sit at the table, some sit around the outside, but we're all there. And Kavita mentioned that everybody's voice is heard. Everybody's voice is heard at these meetings. Not only our Ithaca faculty, but there's a screen at the end of the room, and our New York City faculty are there too. We are one department spread over 2 campuses. So even in the face of this rampant growth that we've all experienced, we had no undergraduates when I first started. Now we have 1,000 steady state undergrad majors. We still operate like a small department. And it's difficult to do that because it doesn't really scale. You know, we've thought about ways of maybe trying to do things more efficiently, but nobody really wants to give that up. Everybody's really reluctant to do things differently because it's worked so well for us in the past. And I think you would find that our junior faculty agree. Everybody's voice is heard. Everybody gets a chance to participate. There are no decisions made behind closed doors. When I was maybe end of my third year of graduate school, Juris came into my office. So we had I was lucky to get a separate office my last year. When I first came, there was one big room with all the grad students in it, 60 grad students and 30 desks. So I had to share a desk. But in my last year, I got a separate office. He came in one February day and he said, I just got a call from Mike Harrison at Berkeley, and he said he has a postdoc position in the fall, and did I have any suitable candidates? And you will be it. Write your thesis. Just like that. Those were pretty much his exact words. So I maybe had a couple papers at the time, and I wasn't really thinking about writing a thesis at that time. I was having fun being a grad student, and it was wonderful life back then. Still is, I think. I'm not sure. You'll have to ask the grad students about that. But I did manage to pull it together, and I did take that postdoc and went off to Berkeley. I spent time at Berkeley. I spent time at a lot of places, but there's really no place like Cornell. So when it came time to come back, when it came time to apply for faculty positions, Cornell was again at the top of my list. Both my wife and I met my wife here when we were in grad school, and we both knew Ithaca. We knew it was a great place to raise a family, so it was pretty high on the list for places we were thinking of maybe relocating to. So I applied around to various faculty positions, and I got an interview here, and I think it went pretty well. And I was waiting to see if I would get an offer, and I got one or two offers from a couple other places, and I was wondering what to do. So of course I asked Juris, called him up and asked him what I should do, and we discussed it for a while. And at that point, he gave me the best piece of advice that I have ever had in my life. He said, "Dexter, don't do anything stupid." Now,
I tried, but I don't.
right. Yes, exactly. I can't say that I've always lived up to that. But in that case, I did. And I didn't do anything stupid. I didn't accept any of these other offers. And finally, the offer from Cornell came through, and I came back up here on the faculty in 1985. And I have no regrets. It's been a wonderful, wonderful place to spend a career. And I've seen the growth of computer science, the growth of our department, and I feel very honored and privileged to have lived at this time and seen the development as it's taken place. Okay, I think that's about all I wanted to say. Let's take a short break, maybe, and we'll have a talk from Allan Borodin from Toronto, starting at 10:30, and he was one of Juris's first students as well, and we'll have him come up to the podium at 10:30. So take this next 5 or 10 minutes and say hello to each other, introduce yourselves, and we'll start again at 10:30. Okay, welcome back. It's my great pleasure to introduce Allan Borodin from Toronto. Allan was Juris's first student, although I'm told there's a star here, an asterisk. There was somebody, an infiltrator from OR, who actually graduated earlier, but we'll put the asterisk next to that person's name, and we'll call Allan Juris's first student. So great pleasure to have.
He wasn't a student of yours. He just snuck into the
He
department.
just snuck in there, okay. All right, so we won't count him at all.
Yeah.
Please welcome Allan.
Thank you. Can you signal me when it's 10 minutes or so, or Dexter, signal me when it's 10 minutes or so.
Beg pardon?
Signal me when it's about 10 minutes to go or something.
Okay, signal you when it's 10
Something
minutes
like
to go.
that.
Will do.
Doesn't matter. Thank you very much, and I thank the organizers for inviting me. If I look nervous, it is because I am. This is the third time I'm speaking about Juris and his work. First time was on a festive for his 60th birthday, and this is actually in print, and you can actually look at it. And in there, I do mention many of his technical results and results of his students. And today, I'm not going to talk about any of his scholarly work. It was fantastic and very influential to the field. But I'd like to just kind of do what the other people are doing. Already what Kavita did and what Dexter did is start talking a little bit on a more personal level of what the influence, the immense impact that Juris had on my life and everything. The second time I talked was when he retired. The first time was 1988 at his festive. Second time was 2001 when he retired. And that a little personal anecdote. I remember that very well. I had just come back from a meeting in Hong Kong on a Thursday. It was a Friday night reception. Always takes time to get out of Toronto. So, but anyway, my wife, I'm 60 at this point in time, which I thought then was an old age, but now I realize how young I was. My wife, for many years, has had suspicions about my driving, and that I should never drive alone. So she said, "You can't go unless somebody goes with you." So we convinced my then 23-year-old daughter to accompany me. And of course, we didn't get there on time. And as I say, one of my first bullets is always try to arrive on time. So we got there late, and everybody was already drinking and having a good time. And Juris was very warm, as he always is, came over and said hello to me and how are you doing and all that. But meantime, it just felt very cold, very unlike Cornell. People kind of you sensed a sort of a coldness. Nobody was talking to me, basically. Well, okay, I understand that. But and then at some point, my daughter decided my 23-year-old she was my youngest daughter, came up and decided to get a drink. She went up to the bar, and the bartender snarkily said, "Are you old enough?" And then she, in a booming voice, said, "You can ask my father, he's right over there." And then all of a sudden, there was a sigh of relief in the room. Everybody realized this was not a trophy wife. It was my daughter. Anyway, do show up in time. Good. I put this up here, try to remember, because as I said, this is my third time talking about Juris. I want to get it right, because as Dexter and everybody said, he's had a tremendous impact on us personally. So Juris, maybe I can read it from there, came to Cornell, and by the way, I'm going to plagiarize a lot of things from the words from other people, use some of their words and everything. But in politics nowadays, if you say it out loud, you can get away with it. So I'm using some of the words that you see, I think, that Sri used, and anyway, it's up there. That's why I put it up there so I can remember. And Juris arrived in Cornell. Anil Nerode, one of the people who brought him here, along with Robert Walker and Richard Conway. He came in 1965, along with Pat Fisher and Jerry Salton. And they came as a group to get a department going right away. I think Juris probably convinced them to come. And I came in 1966 as the first part of the first cohort of students at Cornell. I didn't come with such promise as Dexter did, but that's another story. I'll tell you later about how I got into Cornell. My first course was computational complexity taught by Juris. But I think, as we all, those of us who teach know or hope, that a lot of what you get out of a course is not what's written on the board. You're learning things and not even realizing you're learning them as you're hearing, as you're watching, or as the faculty members is doing the course. And what you learned in Juris's course was an excitement about research. The idea of getting the right models or good models, the idea of forming questions, the idea of, as I said, the balance between intuition and precise results, a good conjecture, but mainly that research is exciting and you could do it. You yourself could do it. And it was exhilarating, and it turned me on. As Dexter said, you get turned on by certain results and you get very excited about it, and I wound up in computational complexity. Now I don't do that anymore, it's too hard. And so I do other things. But let me talk about this idea of a good conjecture. I once was telling yours, just as a student then, about a conjecture I had, and of course it turned out to be wrong. And actually, a little after I was telling other people about it, because I thought I had a proof, somebody else, another young faculty member says, "Oh, that's not a proof." So I was telling Juris, I felt pretty bad about it, and he said, "Well, paraphrasing P.T. Barnum, the only bad conjecture is no conjecture." Conjectures are just things to make you think, and you should try to make them reasonable, of course, but good conjectures and even fallacious conjectures can be very influential. And I've done that on many occasions, fallacious conjectures. He reminded me of that when I think I came back from my first sabbatical here. I did it once again on a result, but in this case, this result actually led to somebody else actually working on it, and because of the conjecture. So I felt good about that part of it. But there was a technical results in the course too. I mean, as I say, probably what you get out of the course is this sense of excitement for a field. But there was a technical result. And what was the technical? Well, there was many technical results, but the technical result was the landmark seminal result that Juris had about complexity hierarchies for time and space, along with Dick Stearns. And that said, briefly, for those who don't know it, is that, well, it's a lot like this talk. If you only had a little more time, I could have done a better job. So it's if you only have a little bit more computing time, you can do more. And Juris's results said that. If you have time t, you can say, there's things you can do in time t log t or t squared, or whatever you want to say, that you can't do in time t. Except there's a little bit of an asterisk there also, that t has to be a reasonable function. So kind of thought about that over a year, and was it really needed? It seemed like kind of an awkward thing to have a condition on it. But it turns out that was my thesis, or a good part of my thesis, that you can construct stupid examples of, or whatever, you can construct examples of computable functions as big as you want, as fast growing as you want, that's such that even though that between, say, what you can do in time t and what you can do in time 2 to the t, or whatever thing you want to put up there, there's nothing going on. Anyway, it got me a job. So, and that was the gap. That was called the gap theorem. And then when it was published, it read gap theorem, and the people who published it then left a gap in the statement of the theorem. And so, if you ever want to look it up, it's not stated. It's just an empty blank. Anyway, now next page. Oh, push this, right? Oh, it worked too. So I want to talk a little bit about just Juris as an advisor, as a mentor, and as a lifelong advocate. being an academic child of a faculty member is not really being a child, a biological child of a faculty member, of a person, you know. But to a large extent, to some significant extent, yours kind of, you know, played that role. You know, you just don't lose interest in your students once they graduate. You don't lose interest in your children once they grow up and have their own families. You know, he kept on being interested in your careers. He kept on promoting your careers. And he did that throughout my career. And in fact, he did it, you know, as a graduate student. I went to my first conference in the fall of '66. I forget the name of the conference. It's now become FOX, the Foundation of Computer Science. It was like Cirque and Automata Theory. You know, Juris took an opportunity when, after somebody spoke, he said, "Oh, but you didn't know about this result by Allan Borodin." And, you know, all of a sudden he's promoting me right in that, you know, in that conference. It was great. And then I remember when I came back from my first sabbatical, he was talking to a visitor and he said, "Oh, Allan has an interesting result." So he was doing that constantly, promoting his students in a very nice way. The people have already talked about how, you know, just the advice you got from Juris. I was, you know, as we all know, you get times when you feel like things are not going the way you want. You feel like, you know, I'm just filling in some work here. He said, no, that's what you do. You keep busy, you keep thinking, you change your environment, you do different things, keep working, and things will come. And he said, you know, change your environment, you know, go take a walk, go take a shower and think in the shower. Now, I don't know if I've ever gotten a result in the shower, but my friends and my family have been very happy about the number of showers I take. So it's a great idea whether or not you get a result. And he was very reassuring. And another thing he once said to me, which I really had in mind because it came up later, you know, about worrying about that you didn't get enough credit for a result. And he said, that's only interesting if you think it's your last result. Then you should worry about it. And that stuck in my mind because I had a situation with one of my students where he followed up on somebody's work and the person wrote and said, you didn't give me enough credit. You shouldn't have worked on this. Ideas are precious. I was still working on it. You know, so I told him what Juris had said. But, you know, on the flip side of that, this idea, if it's only your last result, it kind of hangs as a cloud over you your whole life. Is this my last result? You don't know, you know, so you got to keep working. But it was that type of really sage advice that you keep throughout your life that really was one of his remarkable skills. And accessibility. He was chair when I was a student. His first chair was from 65 to 71. And he was open, the door was open. You can come in and talk to him. And he was always willing to talk to him, you know, unless you had somebody else there. And always willing to listen to what's on your mind, and you want to talk about, you know, whatever you wanted to talk about, he was willing to talk about. And that's, you know, as Dexter says, we try to emulate those qualities. You learn those things without really understanding how much they seep into your way of thinking and your way of behaving as a faculty member, if you go on to be a faculty member. So that's a little bit about Juris as a mentor and as an advisor. And whenever I've come back to Cornell on a number of occasions, it was always a pleasure to talk to him because he always had something interesting to say and always something supportive to say. He was extremely supportive and very gracious. Okay, so a little bit about Juris and his influence on Cornell. Okay, so you know the success of Cornell as a place. Cornell, you know, Cornell, you know, started, as I say, the department started. Anil will talk more to this. He he was there, knowing how it all happened. But I think, as I said, they came together with Pat Fish and Jerry Salton, and so they had a department already. But Juris was a great recruiter and somebody really who could convince you to come here. Don't do anything stupid again, Dexter. And he immediately hired John Hopcroft in 1967, and then Bob Constable in 68, and David Reese, who's here. All of those faculty members are still here. I think only David is retired, but I think the others are still full-time faculty members. No? They all retired. Oh, what's the matter with them?
In fact, as Fred Schneider kindly informed me, I'm now the oldest member of the.
Oh, well. Get used to it. I've been that for a long time. And anyway, so he built this department out of, not out of nothing, because it was a great environment at Cornell, a great math department, industrial engineering, OR was a great department known here. But he built it out quickly. And I think in his tenure as his first chair, he was chair 3 times, he hired, I think, 7 other notable faculty members. And you don't do that without really being a great recruiter and somebody who makes people want to come to the place. And Dexter talked about this environment, or Kavita did, that people sat around after coffee, and then, because I wasn't privy to that as a graduate student, but I came back on my first sabbatical, as I said, in 75, so I got to sit around the coffee table. And he was remarkable at carrying on the conversation, about leading the discussions, and trying to get a consensus. Often was the consensus he wanted. But that's what good leadership is, okay? I mean, he didn't impose it upon people. He was very persuasive about how he thought things should go and what the right decisions were. And it wasn't only department, he would talk about anything. You look forward to lunch every day. And, running a department, and it gets bigger and bigger, I was once told, but, running an academic department is like herding cats. We're all prima donnas, we're all going off and thinking we can do our own thing. But if you want to run a successful department, it's just not getting great people. It's getting great people to work together, to really want the department, that the whole is better than just the individual parts. And Cornell has done that. I think Toronto has done that. David's son is at Toronto. And I think I feel the environment at Toronto is very similar to the environment at Cornell. And we've also had this massive growth. By the way, I think we're going to see a slowdown of that massive growth very soon. So don't get used to the highs. You have to take the lows too. That's what how am I doing on time here?
10-minute warning.
10-minute warning. Oh, good. I can easily do that. So building a discipline, and as I talked about that also in this earlier event for his 60th birthday. People noticed what Cornell was doing. Cornell was building up a great department. Other departments, other great universities were not doing anything. I mean, Carnegie was, and then but Princeton wasn't doing anything. They were letting go people like John Hopcroft. Berkeley was letting go Steve Cook. A lot of places had an attitude of, what is computer science? It's not a distinguished field of mathematics, not algebraic geometry or algebraic topology or whatever. It's what is it? Some sort of applied thing, and the physicists would say, well, it's Fortran programming. You're not going to give a PhD for that. And the engineers said, well, this is not electrical engineering. It was a strange fish. But Juris had a vision, and the words in the retirement thing says visionary. And he was a visionary because he had a vision of computer science being a distinct discipline on its own. One that would be this blend of mathematics and engineering. And that blend, that hybrid blend, would be one of the reasons for its success as a discipline. Of course, success is taught up with technology and applications, but as a discipline, as a scientific engineering discipline, computer science has benefited greatly from this vision. Because yes, computer science started out mainly as a theory place, but Juris understood very early on it had to diversify and bring in the engineering aspects. Today in computer science, we see more of that going on, and we're bringing in the social sciences, largely John Kleinberg's work in social choice and Evers and mechanism design. We're seeing these, game theory, we're seeing the way we're changing other fields and other fields are changing us. And the excitement, this artificial, use the word, discipline that we've made up, that Juris pioneered and convinced other places this is the way to go, was instrumental. He was on the advisory boards or whatever for 12 universities, I believe, and of course that word spreads. He was telling everybody, you better do this, and here's how you're going to do it. And you start off with sound theoretical foundations, you establish your credibility, and you grow. And of course, that's what got money from various agencies. And then he was instrumental as an NSF director, and many years later in keep on supporting computer science as a discipline. So he was extremely influential as somebody who had a vision of computer science and made that and spread that word out and got people to think in those terms. So the final thing I want to say is going back to the word that Neil used, I think, in his thing, Mensch. As you know, the word Mensch has a word meaning in German, but it has a meaning in Yiddish, which doesn't translate exactly, but you can see various definitions, and that's what Juris was. I mean, beyond, or you can say, you can be a fantastic scientist, have great results, you can do, have a lot of influence in the field, but that doesn't mean you're a mensch, okay? And Juris was that, even though, he was this very dignified, very gentleman, he was very warm, very, very receptive, so easy to talk to, and so willing to help people, that I think the words kind, thoughtful, because he was very thoughtful and introspective about so many things, and honorable, a good person, really describes Juris. And I can't express enough how much things that I learned directly and just by being kind of observing him has influenced my life. And I really want to say, I hope I said it while he was still with us, but he was a great person and a great mentor. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Allan, for those wonderful words. We have a question. Wait, hold on a second, because we're recording. Let's get you a mic. So, handheld mic, yep. Thanks. Turn that on.
It's not a question. Oh. We liked your talk. No. Do you want a question? I'll give you a question. The first PhD was not from OR. It was a guy named Howard Elder, whose advisor was Chris Pottle, who was an ECE. He was a member of the department for a few years.
Oh, okay.
And he got it just before you. And his thesis title was On the Feasibility of Voice Input to an Online Computer Processing System.
Wow.
Oh.
Wow.
Anyway, he snuck in. I'm sorry he got in before you.
Well, I have been ever since, and if I can't do any, but
No,
He wasn't yours?
This,
No, Juris a student.
no, he was not Juris's
So
student.
I
He was
get
Chris
that
Papa.
without any
You are the
asterisk.
first Juris. You get that.
Thank
But
you.
not the first PhD in computer science.
So
This
I know
guy
that.
snuck
I know-
in,
Yeah, I
unfortunately.
We don't care about that.
sad about that, but there's nothing I can do.
Anyone else? Did we have any questions from anybody online? Okay.
I don't ever get any questions in my questions either.
I'd just like to say that I get all my best results in the shower.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Okay, let's take a very short break and we'll reconvene at 11 o'clock with Herb Lin. What? 3 minutes. All right, 2 minutes.
Yeah, I'm just
I
turning
think
it
this,
down.
this mic needs to be up a little bit.
Well, if it goes up too much,
Then it feeds back. Yeah, maybe that's best.
Yeah.
Let's do that.
I think there might be a hearing aid at the touch to talks. Yeah. Push to talk and then it'll go back all off. It sounded like a hearing aid to me.
Okay, so I went up in there while I was going and turned it down.
Oh, you did? Okay.
And it's still
Okay. Hello.
Hiya.
Hey.
Okay.
So there's a podium microphone. The middle button advances you,
And how do I go back?
and the
The
back
bottom.
button is the
So
bottom one.
Forward, back. Okay, great.
And I think that would be great if we could put this
Absolutely.
on you.
Absolutely
That
right.
would be okay.
Good.
That just clicks.
That
on
just
you.
clicks
Yeah.
down in here, and great. Thank you. Sorry? Of course.
Okay, welcome back. After that mercifully short break.
I don't think your mic, is your mic on?
Is my mic on? My mic should be on. It's not pointing up.
Try to.
Yeah, that's better.
Is that better?
Okay, welcome back. Please take your seats. I'm very pleased to be able to introduce Herb Lin from Stanford University. Made it all the way here from Stanford to speak on some work that he did with Juris for the National Academies called Computing the Future, that turned out to be a very influential piece of work that really set the direction for computer science for this millennium. And so, Herb, thanks for joining us.
Okay, thank you.
And welcome.
Thanks so much for having me, and lots of appreciation to Fred for having, Fred Schneider for having invited me. Let's see. Technology wins again, right? So, if you can, will mine work? Okay, great, thank you. So this is the report that Dexter was talking about, Computing the Future, put out by the Computer Science and Telecommunications Board of the National Research Council of the National Academy of Sciences, National Academies now. There on the right, you see the committee responsible for it. You see Juris's name at the top of the list. David Rees was part of the committee too. Unfortunately, he had to leave to go back to take care of his spouse. But I told him as he went out that Juris always said family first. So that was an important thing to, to be able to say to David as he left. Anyway, and so it's an interesting group of people. Note that there were some people on it from industry and other people on it from computational science. That is, this committee was deliberately constructed to be broad rather than narrow. Okay? And I was the study director. This was my first National Academies study. Just for you who don't know about the way the Academy is structured, there's the honorific people on top. Those are the people like Juris who are elected to the National Academy of Engineering and so on. They run the National Research Council. Within that, there's the Computer Science and Telecommunications Board, and they spin off project committees like the committee that did Computing the Future. Okay. This was CSTB's mission as it has evolved. The first part of it is provide a base of expertise within computer science and information technology within the academies. And as you now know, as everyone knows now, information technology is in everything and touches nearly every aspect of science policy. And the academy gives advice to the government on science policy. Okay. Study process is a complex one. I just want to point out two important parts. One is the committee selection part. That is, the academy goes out of its way to select people of high stature and reputations in their field. And that's a very extensive process of vetting. And the report, once it generates a report, but that report is subject to peer review by a group of people that is comparable in expertise to the study committee. Those 2 points are important for comments later on that I'll be making. My job in this was to keep the study on track, anticipate problems, and to sort of be the foil for the chair. Okay, so Juris and I got into many discussions, some of them not heated. Juris was never heated about that sort of stuff, but I had to persuade him on things, and so we went back and forth on stuff. Okay, the style is not an academic report. It's not an academic paper. It's not a book in the sense that people usually write books in academia, but it has to be, accessible. Okay, to, for example, congressional staff. I'm a former congressional staff member. I've got a PhD in physics, but I was a former congressional staff member. And a lot of that informed my work with Juris. I'll talk about that later. And it was supposed to be able to communicate to them in words that they understand, that congressional staff understand. Enough analysis to satisfy an external reviewer. It's not an academic paper, but not just opinion. Because we have to make an argument and substantiate it. This is the background of Computing the Future. The committee was called the Committee to Assess the Scope and Direction of Computer Science and Technology, not just computer science. Important point. This was a tasking that was originated within CSTB itself with an understanding that it was time to look at the field. Physics does this, chemistry does this, astronomy does this, and so on. It was time at the time to look at what computer science was as a field. And as a first comprehensive research-focused report focusing on academic computer science. This was in 1990. Okay. The charge was how best to organize the conduct of research and teaching in CS and E, note the E, the engineering part, for the future. This was part of it. As an academic discipline, CS&E has been remarkably successful in its first decades of existence, but both the intellectual focus and the environment are in the midst of significant change. We need a forward-looking assessment. That's what this project was convened to address in 1990. Okay. Just to bring you back down to, back to a past, we had a 486 processor in 1990. Okay, 100 megahertz, right? NSFNet had a 1.5 megabit line as its backbone, right? Think about what it is now. Look at my email address, okay? That was my email address, okay? It was ridiculous. Okay. The content. We said that computer science as a discipline was strong and accomplished. In 1990, that was not well established. Okay. A lot of computer scientists labored in the shadows of physics and mathematics and electrical engineering. Okay. And we wanted to say, no, that wasn't true anymore. Maybe at some point in the past you could argue about that, but whatever the past was, it wasn't true then. Okay? And that computing was a unique form of scientific inquiry. That was an important thing to say too at the time, that you could get interesting results just by computing. It wasn't just theory, and it wasn't experimentation in the usual sense of the word. It was a different way of conducting scientific inquiry, hence the computational science part of it. And it has a distinct focus. We talked about the focus on computers, and the theory in computer science provides constraints on the artifacts. It's not like there's experiments in physics that validate theory in the sense, that's what physicists do. Okay. In computer science, theory plays a very different role. We said that CS had to expand its intellectual boundaries, that intellectually substantive and challenging problems do arise in fields other than CS per se. And that was an important point. In other words, it wasn't just programming support that computer science had to offer to physics or climate science or chemistry. That there were real substantively hard problems there from the computer scientist perspective. We also argued that the difference between applied and basic research didn't mean anything, didn't mean very much in computer science. That they both called for the same scientific and engineering design and judgments, creativity, skill, talent, and trivial knowledge is not just in the applied stuff, and significant knowledge is not just in basic stuff. Okay? That you can get good stuff out of both fields, just like both domains of basic and applied, just like you can get bad stuff out of that. And the growing ubiquity, this is 1990, ubiquity of computing within society places a premium on the largest possible diffusion of CS expertise. Okay. And that high levels of support for scientific research are tied to the promise of meeting national needs. Okay. Therefore, CS had to broaden or it was going to become irrelevant to computing practice. Color commentary at the time, support for the arts and humanities was about 10% that for R&D, scientific R&D. Ballpark 10%. That's what you could argue was devoted towards curiosity. Okay. So what was that factor of 10 from? We thought it had something to do with the promise of meeting national needs. Okay. The report priorities to sustain the core first. That was the first priority, sustain the core. A deep, rich, intellectually productive effort, indispensable for practice. Second priority, broaden the field. Notice we also said that broadening will also result in new insights with wide applicability, thereby enriching the core. There was an interaction between applications and, quote, core, and improving undergraduate CS education. There was a controversy after we released the report. In 1992, John McCarthy at Stanford University organized a petition to withdraw the report because it was misleading and harmful as an agenda for future research. Our objections include defining this field in terms of a narrow set of applied objectives, and by implication that the tone of the field is to be set by government agencies, administrators, and industrialists, and computer scientists are just the soldiers on the ground. Anita Jones framed this question really as follows. Should the intellectual agenda for research agenda for CS be defined based only on the questions of interest in computer science, or should society have a say? Society which is paying for that research. The outcome. The academies and all members of the committee reaffirmed the report, including 2 of McCarthy's former students. Okay. McCarthy and Juris agreed to a debate about the report at the NAS, at the National Academy of Sciences. Before the debate, McCarthy told Juris that he wasn't going to attack the book, and during the debate, he declined to participate. Hartmanis made a presentation on the book, and McCarthy didn't say anything. Okay? We ultimately sold over 3,000 copies of a science policy report. Okay? This petition couldn't have been better for publicity. Okay? We agreed to make a few changes, I'll say in a minute, to clarify points that McCarthy specifically went out of his way to misinterpret. I asked McCarthy at the end why he declined to participate in the report, in the debate. He said, I was intimidated. I said, why? He said, because there were congressional staff in the room. Okay. And the other part is that, Juris, as you know, always the gentleman in public, always very polite and measured and so on. If you read some of his emails from that, you see that he had a different side, which was interesting. Okay. The second printing of the book the second printing includes a few minor editorial revisions that clarify the intent of the authors. Okay. Unfortunately, that line has disappeared from the PDF version. You have to actually have the copy of the book, which I have. Okay, here are the changes. In the preface, this was on the left. It said, academic computer scientists and engineers who are the troops on the ground that do research and teach students. We changed that to, who are the individuals that do the real work of performing research and teaching students. Confession, but Juris has already outed me on this in an interview. I was the one responsible for the troops on the ground phrase. Okay? I drafted stuff and, he approved it, and so on. The committee approved it. Why did I use the word troops on the ground? Because in Congress, support the troops, right? Those are the people who actually deserved support. That was the rationale for it. McCarthy interpreted that as if they were just the slaves, but in the congressional environment, everyone wants to support the troops. So that was the rationale for that. And then there were a couple of changes in the executive summary, and that was the end of it. In 1996 or 7, there was a statue was erected at the university at UIUC outside the engineering library. Okay, it has a student reading a copy of Computing the Future. John McCarthy heard about this and wrote the following on it. Okay. Put a statue of a student reading the book. Seems a reasonable thing. It turns out to be. It's the infamous Computing the Future report. Students not studying science or engineering, but merely reading a policy report. Is the statue still there? As far as I know. One that can't distinguish between science and engineering. For all eternity, the student will be reading this obsolete report. So, anyway. So I just imagine Juris looking, looking at this with a certain amount of pleasure. The legacy of this. Look, on the coupling of research to the economy, that is a big deal, right? This is a version, the 2016 CSTB version of what's in the business, around CSTB and elsewhere called the tire tracks diagram. We can see why, which traces the contribution of different fields on the bottom of CS research, note the broad spread of research domains to different parts of the economy. Okay, so the red here is all university research. The blue is industrial research. The green turns into, sorry, the bullets here turn into product. That should be black. I'm sorry. And the products turn into markets, and $1 billion markets turn into $10 billion markets. Okay. So obviously, CS has had, and has had a major impact on the economy. Nobody will dispute that. Okay. And now, today, in ways that we didn't, which weren't true in 1990, information technology is everywhere, for better and for worse. Okay. Fred, in his invitation to me, said that he thought that perhaps it was a roadmap for the computing schools. Okay. His suggestion was to look at Cornell and Berkeley and MIT. So I took a look at their founding statements on their webpage. Okay. CS was born out of the need to provide a home for academics who wanted to study the use of technology rather than the creation of it. Right. Interdisciplinary structure, specializing in machine learning, AI, and so on, ubiquitous computing, user experience, tech, law, policy, and much more. That's a pretty broad statement. Berkeley, what it started, privacy as a key role, as a key aspect of this, usability, credibility, reliability, draws on diverse scholars. CS, design, social sciences, law, policy, and so on. MIT, the Schwarzman College, okay, supporting the rapid growth of computer science and AI, facilitating collaborations between computing and other disciplines, focusing on social and ethical responsibilities of computing through combining technological approaches and insights from these other fields. Also, a broad statement of where computing can make a difference. Okay. I looked at the iSchool, the Association of Information Schools website. They have a list of research topics. It's, these are some of the research topics in there. All of these, I think, I would argue, are CS heavy. It's only some of them, but it's an interesting, interesting list. Okay. Another legacy is, we now see a major focus in academia and in Congress and so on policy and research on societal impact, right? We are now studying the use of information in society really seriously. This is a big deal, right? This is the debate over whether or not big tech should be regulated, for example. And misinformation in, election manipulations. Okay? It all comes under that now. What would we be having the debate we're now having about Facebook if it weren't for the Russian manipulations of the election in 2016? Here are some of the salient issues that people in Congress are worrying about now. Internet, there's the question about, not just Congress, in policy circles. Internet governance across national boundaries, right? Fragmentation of the internet, balkanization. Right? Algorithmic discrimination. Who gets access? Groups that get access and they're denied access or don't have access to broadband. Use of cyber-enabled information technologies as instruments of public policy. Okay? When is it appropriate to go on an attack to kill another's computer in another nation, or to influence their politics using cyber-enabled tools? Okay? Disinformation and information disorder, chaos, societal fragmentation, right? Polarization in society. How much should you regulate IT companies? Now, all of these issues are now really front and center on the public policy agenda in big ways. Okay. So, did CTF have a long-term impact? Well, if you look at organizational evolution or revolution, seriously, it often reveals, usually the outcome is many things contributed. So it's really not fair to say that CTF was the single cause of this. That would be a ridiculous claim to make. Okay? On the other hand, although the report didn't predict any of the specific manifestations that I described, it helped set the stage for all of them. Okay? Much of what the report articulated as a vision has been instantiated as I think we hoped for it, but we didn't foresee its spread or how fast it would be. And that was, I think that's pretty good. CS remains strong. CS departments are overwhelmed with students wanting to study. Computing is spread and continues to spread throughout society. Right? I had to recently buy a refrigerator. I can't get it without Wi-Fi, right? And you can now get a Wi-Fi, actually a Bluetooth-enabled toothbrush. Okay, so it's everywhere. Okay? And the influence has been bidirectional, right? The application side, as the CS has affected the way the applications have gone, and the applications have driven what's of importance to CS. Okay? So there's been a strong coupling, bidirectional coupling. So Juris was the first computer scientist that I ever had a real working relationship with. Okay. He introduced me to the culture of CS as a deep and interesting and fascinating culture, and introduced me that I didn't know about computational complexity when I signed up for doing this report. I think I had some role in introducing him to the realities of US science policy, being straight off the hill. It was the first report, the first job that I had after leaving Capitol Hill, thanks to Marjorie Blumenthal, who was the founding director of CSTB. It was only after a little while that I realized he had a background in physics. Right? I didn't realize that. And maybe because of that, he was willing to treat me as a peer. He didn't have to. I mean, he was up there and I was down here. Okay? But he went out of his way to treat me as a peer. Okay? And he meant it, as far as I could tell. He didn't have to do that, but he did. And the breadth of his interest. Think about this for a minute. He did a lot of his work in computational complexity, well, not in academia, right? When he was at GE, General Electric was responsible for computational complexity. That's a kind of a mind-blowing statement, right? That's sort of weird. So I think that in the end, CTF was a remarkable success. And it really helped put CSTB, Computer Science and Telecommunications Board, on the map of serious science policy players as an advocate for computer science. I was going to say in spite of, but maybe because of the McCarthy petition. And it certainly was it was a life-altering experience for me with Juris, okay? Because that effort, was a success. I was able to build on the success. I went on to become chief scientist at the CSTB, and that's what launched my career at Cornell. So and it all traces back to this report. So, the last thing I just wanted to comment on was the Juris Herb difference. At the end of the report, after it was all done, he said, I'm tired of you seeing those cheap pens. That's on the left, that's a Herb. Okay. And he bought me this lovely, lovely Mont Blanc ballpoint pen, okay, which unfortunately did not survive a house fire that I had. I looked for it and, in trying to prepare for this, I would have brought it. but as I say, the house fire, I think, consumed it. I will miss Juris, and I'm sorry. I was very sorry to hear about his passing. Yeah, and so, anyway, thank you. I'm happy to entertain any questions or comments if we have time.
Questions?
So I'm curious if either you or anyone else here, that report was really important. And sometimes years later you look back and it's like, oh, I wish I had done this. Or did he ever express anything about things he wished he had done differently in that report? Things he had missed, things that he would have emphasized differently?
Not to me. But I think he was on the whole rather pleased with the report and the way it came out. It certainly didn't sour his appreciation for science policy. If it had, he would not have gone on to be, AD for computer science at National Science Foundation.
Herb, I really enjoyed your talk, and I had one question, which is if you can remember or tell us about any surprises that Juris might have expressed as he learned how U.S. policy or science policy worked.
A surprise, I think that, no, he understood the importance of coupling CS to issues of national importance, the issues that were important to him. He understood that. But he was totally baffled by McCarthy. I mean, he was just, he didn't understand at all why McCarthy was doing this. It did mention AI, but not in, I understand. I mean, some color commentary on that in the, yes. Yes, I have come to realize that.
Just a comment.
Point it toward your mouth.
A comment. I heard Juris say several times something to the effect that mathematics made a huge mistake around the turn of 19th to 20th century, that during that period, much of what we call today theoretical physics, fluid dynamics, some of civil engineering was done in mathematics departments. And mathematicians decided that it wasn't pure enough and basically banished all these to other places in the academic universe, and that computer science should never make this kind of a mistake.
I can easily imagine Juris saying that. Yes, that's entirely consistent with the Juris that I know.
I think it's ironic that I married a McCarthy.
Anyone else? Any online comments? Okay, thanks again, Herb.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Great. Okay, we'll move right on to the next talk since it's 11:30. It's my great pleasure to introduce Anil Nerode. In addition to Juris being one of the founders of the department, Anil also played a critical role in the founding of the department. I believe Anil went out for a Sloan grant, which allowed the department to be formed in 1965, so he was instrumental in that. I'm also pleased to say that in addition to Juris being the chair of my committee, Anil was also on my committee, so I owe a great debt of gratitude to him too. I know he doesn't like me to say this, but if I think of Juris as my intellectual father, I often think of Anil as my intellectual mother. So, Anil, please.
Well, first of all, let me say what a pleasure it is to be able to pay tribute to one of my dear friends over such a long period, with a period of 52 years. What I'm going to do, part of what I'm going to say has been reproduced in print, but I did it in such a way as to not intrude very much. So what I'm going to do is to make a little bit of a speech about, again, the origins of the computer science department and exactly how it was set up. I think there's something to be learned from what I and Juris put together as a growth plan, so let me start there. The first thing is that I arrived myself at Cornell in 1959 and became an associate professor in 1962, which is, after all, 3 years before the department was actually set up. For reasons that I couldn't understand at the time, I was asked by the first director of our Center for Applied Mathematics to replace him for a year while he went on leave. I had kept as a secret the fact that I actually had been doing applied mathematics, in fact, weapon systems design, from the time I was a graduate student, starting in about the third year of graduate school, full-time secret employee, so to speak, along with doing my own thesis. The reason I kept quiet about it was that that was a period in which the American military was extremely unpopular, and I was a very popular consultant for a lot of military matters, also other matters, but like, for example, a little later, the founding of the Environmental Protection Agency. I had the first risk contracts with them. I kept that out of Cornell completely. So here I am in 1962 or 3, acting chairman of a new graduate program, PhD only program in applied mathematics, for no reason that I could think of, because I thought they didn't know that I had this secret career. Somebody did, otherwise they wouldn't have put me in charge of it. And I got an approach from the vice president for research of the university, suggesting that we apply to the Sloan Foundation to set up some sort of entity in computer science. I never found out officially how he had got to that point. Unofficially, I made the following conjecture, and this is something about, it's particular to Cornell, and I don't know whether it's of a general interest. What happened after World War II is that Cornell was left behind entirely as far as theoretical backing for both computational science and, for that matter, scientific engineering. The dean at Cornell during that World War II and immediately after it thought that the primary, what is the word? The primary clientele for Cornell graduates in engineering would be an extension of the pre-war demand. Cornell had this incredible record of having produced all of the main engineers who electrified the entire world, not just Cornell. We were one of the first 1870s first places in the world. I mean places, I don't just mean universities, which was completely electrified. If you look in our, the remains of the hydroelectric plant are in one of our local rivers. But in any case, he made a mistake. He built thinking that the demand for Cornell engineering graduates would continue to be for graduates in what you might call really industrial design and promulgation of physical devices. And he built the buildings that way too. During the same period, MIT was the center for radar research, but for many other sorts of scientific research. It came out as the place where the post-war scientific engineering would be developed. I think I'm not boasting to say that before World War II, Cornell was the leading engineering school in the world. But after World War II, MIT was the leading. If you looked at the advertisements for MIT in the 20s, they were incomparably below the level of the advertisements for Cornell. So it lost its position entirely. And the result was that the deans of engineering after World War II, and up to the time I came to Cornell, were not really science-oriented. The dean at the time I'm talking about, which is 62, realized that we'd fallen far behind, that we're not a scientific engineering institution, and he went around to various universities, I think with Conway, who was one of the figures setting up the computer science department here. They toured and discovered that something called computer science looked as if it belonged in the future of major departments. And they were really following a lead from MIT, which didn't have a department, but was a leader in computer science due to the work during World War II anyway. So when I came in as a temporary director for unknown reason of the Center for Applied Mathematics, I was approached by the vice president of the university to try to get one of the favorite Cornell foundations, which was Sloan, to set up a department. So with the help of a couple of other people, we wrote up an appropriate plan and submitted it. And we got a gift of about $500,000, which is not much on current standards, but multiplied by about 10, it was worth about $5 million. That was what we started with as a base in order to set up the department. I'm saying much more here than I have actually in print, and some of this will be a surprise to the people who are here, but this seems like a very good place to say it. So what happened was that one way or another, we had this small committee to try to organize the department, which consisted of Conway, me, and Bob Walker. Now, Bob Walker, whom you will never have heard of, unless you really were the first group to come, he had been chairman of the math department for 10 or 12 years in the 1930s and early, late 1940s to the 1950s. And he was very well trusted. He also did not, his PhD was in algebraic geometry from Harvard, but he spent his career doing numerical analysis. So at least he was someone who was related with some sort of applications, but he actually didn't have much connection with the computer science community as it existed then. I did, since I actually got my formal degree in computability and logic and so on. I knew all the original people at MIT and at Berkeley and so on. I was the first, how to put it, when Lisp was invented, there was the first paper, which was published in the, I don't remember where it was published. I was the first reviewer for it, though, back in 1960. You know, I knew Rabin and Scott when they were students. So I actually was quite conversant with a lot, and since I did applied mathematics, I knew the people at Bell Labs and at IBM. So I was in a position where I had the information. about the community, which was not really a community at all at that point. It was just a bunch of people hired in different corporations. So when we started our search for a chairman so that we could start something, I set up, there was no background for it at Cornell. In other words, if I invited somebody in to speak, there wasn't any audience who would know anything about it. So what I did, and this is me, so what I did was to get a couple of people at Cornell who knew a little bit of computer science and put together a fall term lecture series, or actually course, to teach them a little bit about what was known in computer science. Went through a bunch of different topics. Then in the spring, we did our interviewing, and I had established an initial audience. So there'd be somebody in the audience. You don't want to bring somebody in to start something up when there's nothing there at all. A couple of the people in that audience did get Cornell PhDs in computer science later, but that's sort of irrelevant. Then we looked over the possible candidates and, of course, interviewed them. They interviewed them means they came in and gave a talk, and we tried to figure out what kind of vision they had. Now, let me tell you, I'm going to boast at this point. At that point, I had the vision that in the end, theoretical computer science and its manifestation in chips and so on, that it would take over the world. In other words, I thought that every single intellectual discipline, every single department would end up with somebody who needed a great deal of expertise in some sort of further computer science, something that would apply in their area. And I was personally looking for somebody who actually had vision. So we interviewed a dozen extremely well-established people. Only one of them had vision, which was Juris. And whether he had that vision all his life or whether I sort of induced it, I don't know, and I don't care. He actually was in complete agreement about the future of computer science. That was the start. So now, I'd actually like to describe what then happened as we set the thing up. First of all, you're starting in a vacuum. I've had an artificial audience in order to be able to have the people who are candidates for chairman, to have somebody to have some kind of audience rather than just an empty field. But how would we start out? First of all, we had not hired him yet. We were also interviewing simultaneously with our limited budget for 2 assistant professors. Now, there I can actually claim all the credit. The 2 assistant professors were from Boston. One of them, Hartley, was a student of Hartley Rogers, who's one of my close colleagues in computability. And the other one was a student of the Harvard professor who was the only representative of computer science that had ever existed at Harvard. And he'd been there for many years. And he was a specialist in minimizing Boolean circuits. He was not really a computer science. He was a very limited computer scientist, in fact, a limited intellectual. But if you look at his list of PhDs out of Harvard, you'll recognize about 20 of the names. I don't want to go into any further detail there, but how to put it, Pat Fisher, who was an assistant professor, I think it was Harvard, he was a student of Hartley Rogers, who's one of my best friends, and Jerry Salton was an assistant professor at Harvard, again under one of my best friends, and we interviewed them. And then we decided to see if we got a compatible team. So basically, we asked Juris whether he was willing to start out the department with those 2 people as an assistant professors. This is to stay within our budget and to get going. These are very detailed things that I'm telling you, but they're the work that's involved in setting up something where there was nothing, and where, in fact, the university had gone in the wrong direction from World War II to 1965. That's an extreme statement. I'm glad everybody who was responsible for misdirecting the university is dead, so I can insult them. it was really weird when I came in and discovered that nobody knew anything at all about computing, theoretical or practical. That was a genuine shock. The government agencies I consulted with had very primitive computing equipment. It was very expensive, but they knew all about the fact that they needed them, and the university was absolutely absent in that respect. So Juris and these two people got together, and they decided they would be a compatible team. We hired them all at the same time. But then the next problem that came up was that you really couldn't set up a department at Cornell without any undergraduates in it. But fortunately, because of our field structure, we have a separate graduate school into which you get a PhD. So what we did was not set up the department the first 2 years. We set up a graduate field, and that's a technical term at Cornell. And they were professors of computer science without any department under them. That was very unusual because Cornell didn't have anything else like that, but I was the one who figured out, how to get around the difficulties. And so what happened was we started out with a graduate field in which several people in the room got their PhDs. Oh, by the way, there are at least three of the speakers today, at least. I was on their PhD committee. At that point, we established the graduate courses, and if you have 3 good people, you can put together a decent graduate program, very small for the first year. Once this was actually set up, the graduate students flowed in from all over and from so on. But the problem was that with such a small faculty, if a bunch of people flow in at the undergraduate level, you can't advise them. That was why we set up only a graduate program at the beginning. What I arranged with the math department, and I wasn't chairman, it's just that I somehow ended up in this role. What I arranged with the math department was that for the first 4 or 5 years, I can't remember exactly how long, when we did set up the department, the undergraduate advisors of the undergraduates going in from Cornell would be math majors with a CS minor. That worked extremely well. That brought in the tuition money, which is required in order to hire more faculty members, because any university administrator at a higher level will tell you that in the end, you do have to pay for more professors by having more students. And there weren't any great addenda for the endowment at that point coming out of computer science. And so at that point, the math department, which had 40 people in it, handled the undergraduate majors. And of course, the CS people did too, and the more of them there were, the more the load could be shifted back to the computer science department. And after 5 or 6 or 7 years, I got a call saying that we could cancel this arrangement, and they had enough faculty to go ahead with doing the complete job of advising. That was a sort of, there's some other point that I wanted to make about the steps that were involved in getting a full program going. Let's see what the best way to put it would be that grants did come in, but the size of the grants was relatively small. As the student body grew, it was possible to have more and more of the to hire more. I did say that. The basis of hiring the new professors was the increase in the undergraduate enrollment, as it should be. But these are a lot of extremely small individual steps. What was going on with Juris and me? We were on the phone every day to get around some university nonsense. In other words, he and I were on that's how we become close friends. The number of tiny things that can go wrong in sort of arbitrary rules of any university are infinite. And we overcame them one at a time. I think that I made one, I can't remember what it was, but one piece of poor advice about the financing, which is after 3 or 4 years. What happened was he'd call me up, and then I'd call up anybody that I knew who knew anything about these weird rules that universities run by. Then I call him back. So it's sort of a funny relationship. But on the academic side, as the first graduate students came in, there were 3 faculty members, and obviously, under our committee system, you had a chair and a couple of people besides that on your committee, PhD committee. So Juris and I were on almost all the same CS PhD committees, me for math and him for CS, for the first 4 or 5 years. And a number of those people are here, and a number of them became famous. But one of the things that came out of Juris's very broad and gentle conception of the subject was somehow that he propagated that in that a number, because it's so early in the subject, a number of these people became very shortly founders or computer science department heads at institutions all over the country and in Canada. And it turned out to have been, in that respect, also a good idea to have started out producing good PhDs, because those good PhDs were so early into the field that when they went out into the universities, which had not got as far as we got, they become founding fathers of computer science there. It was a very gratifying pattern. During all of this, as a whole, I kept to being minor member of the computer science PhD committees. I had enough graduate students of my own in mathematics, so that I didn't want to move toward taking a lot of computer science major advisors for the PhD. I've produced more math PhDs than any other person in the history of Cornell, and I couldn't possibly have taken on a load beyond being a minor member of the committees. But he and I worked as a team, and you wouldn't know it on the surface. It was mostly phone calls for how to get around some stupid thing, of which there were hundreds over several years. What I originally wanted was the computer science to be set up as a university-wide department. There weren't any. A university-wide department, which would have a finger in, a representative of some sort eventually in all departments that would involve computer science. That, my opinion at that time, was the same as Juris's, which was this would happen. It might take a while, but if you understood what was going on, that would happen. This was bargaining that I was doing at the very beginning. I bargained with the people who run the university for our all university department. The offer made was, we can't do that, but you can have 2 deans. And the 2 deans were arts and sciences and engineering. In other words, the department chairman would meet with both of them and keep the computer science from being absorbed into engineering, which was, after all, the motivation for doing this in the first place. As you're all aware, in some universities, computer science was absorbed into engineering, and where it was, a lot of other things were stilted and difficult to carry out, because people you'd want might be, for example, complete software people in a school that's devoted to pieces of machinery, well, you all know what those are because a lot of you are of that age. But in any case, we bargained down to where Juris reported to the engineering dean and the arts dean. Now, I knew all these guys, and I had lunch with them. At one point, the arts college dean said, who was a historian, said, a good friend of mine too, said, I can't understand anything they're saying. I want to give it to the engineering dean. Well, I can understand that. I'm very sorry he did. So at that point, after we'd been really well established for about maybe 10 years, Juris reported to only the engineering dean, but computer science was powerful enough at that point so that it didn't get sort of limited to engineering. The broader vision he had, and I had the same vision, the broader vision at least was still there, and CS was strong enough to actually maintain a great deal of independence over 19th century engineering, which is the way I would put it. The fact that we now have a whole school of computer science, it's a very nice thing to have. I'd like to emphasize the fact that because of its name, it can't be quite as comprehensive as Juris and I would have liked. I'd like to see people with joint appointments. I'm not talking just for me, I'm talking for both of us. I'd like to see people with joint appointments, basically in every possible department of the university. And we're a little bit limited by being called a school, but it's certainly fantastic improvement over 50 years ago. Much of what I'm talking about is not recorded except in this small speech. Much of it was actually phone conversations, trying to figure out how to get something going on a fairly large scale. We did have some decent actual later collaborations. I ran a Mathematical Sciences Institute funded by the Army for 10 or 11 years. And about a quarter of it was computer science. And so we at least some of the people he was interested in having visiting came in through that door as well, because there was some money there. But you know, the thing about Juris was he had a kind of a perpetual peace of mind. He didn't really, well, this is just personal. I never saw him get excited in times of somewhat adversity. He was very quiet, and he was incredibly accepting. And by that I mean that you could often hear a confrontational tone from visitors who had an axe to grind. Never upset him at all. He simply absorbed what it was, took the good out of it, and went on. So I think that from my point of view, he had a sort of an interesting, sharp way of speaking at times, but he was so good-willed that it permeated the space and the people around him. And of course, I miss him very much. I haven't talked for the requisite length of time, or have I? I'm going to stop. Is this okay?
Yep.
Okay, good.
Perfect. Anil, thank you so much for that retrospective. Any questions? Yes, we have a question from Dean. Yep, wait for your mic.
I have questions too, but I've asked that at lunch because I didn't know about some of this. So I didn't know about some of this history. That's great to know. And it's interesting to know about the arts. I'll follow up with some questions because our structure remains one of the more complex structures on campus. But it is actually more cross-cutting. So the college has, as you said, instead of joint appointments, I think we have joint appointments. This is across the College of Computing and Information Science. So it's broader than just computing. It's computing and information science. And I think we have joint appointments at least 3 or 4 other colleges. And if you include the field and 0%ers, I believe we are in every other college on campus. Well, maybe not the vet school. Maybe not, but with every other school, we have either 0% appointments or field, which is, I think, true to Juris's vision, which I'm proud of, and we will continue to lead into that vision, of course.
Would you repeat the essence of what she said? I couldn't quite, my ears are not very good. No, I want you to sort of summarize what she just said.
That we have collaborations, joint appointments with just about every other college on campus, with the possible exception of the vet school.
Oh, yeah, of course, yeah.
So that is true to yours as well.
But I was really only speaking about my own contacts with Juris.
I should also mention that another area of collaboration is we have a nice reciprocal agreement with between computer science and math, where a PhD student in either department can get a master's degree in the other field just by applying for it, which is fairly unique.
Of course, I originated that from the mathematics department.
Yes, you did, and I had to do the cleanup because we were told by the graduate school that after it had been running for 15 years, that we were illegal. And we had to run it by New York State, which we finally did, but that came out successful.
If it had not been for that arrangement, several of my students would not have founded computer science departments.
Yep, and we're happy that they did.
And I want to say I love these events because that's news to me and I'd probably be administering it, so I'm glad I now know about this.
Other questions? Okay, thanks everybody. Thanks all the speakers this morning. A nice lunch for those of you who are participating in the Princeton Yale room, or I have no idea where that is, but down the hall. And we'll reconvene at 1:30 with some further talks. Enjoy your lunch.